Blue and silver family, take a deep breath, because this moment calls for calm and confidence. The trade deadline is passed, the board is set, and now, every piece matters. Every decision in the front office could be the line between glory and regret. Detroit has come this far with hard work, vision, and courage, but the game that truly matters begins now. The destiny of this team lies in the hands of those who built it with purpose, and in the hearts of the fans who never stopped believing. The city feels the weight of the moment, the players feel it, and you, the fan, know exactly what's at stake. So hit that like button right now, because it helps this channel keep roaring strong. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Should the team look for reinforcements, or keep trusting the core that's already here? Detroit's roar doesn't come from fear. It comes from preparation, from hunger, and from the unshakable belief that this story is far from over. Go Lions! After the 2025 NFL trade deadline, the Detroit Lions find themselves in a familiar situation, one where every roster spot matters, every depth piece counts, and every decision by Brad Holmes could make or break the stretch run. Detroit's front office has built one of the strongest cores in the NFC, but as injuries begin to pile up and the playoff picture tightens, the conversation shifts to what comes next. Who's out there that could step in and keep the machine running smoothly? Let's make one thing clear, this isn't about desperation. The Lions aren't scrambling. This is about staying sharp, being proactive, and ensuring that if something goes wrong, the team can plug a hole without skipping a beat. That's why Holmes and Dan Campbell are scanning the list of available free agents, not because they need stars, but because they understand how crucial depth becomes in November and December. Some names are immediately off the table. Don't expect to see Detroit pursuing players like Christian Wilkins or Linval Joseph at defensive tackle. The interior of the Lions' defensive line is set. Between DJ Reader, Tyreek Williams, and Alan McNeil, this group has handled the trenches as well as any team in football. That's not a position that needs fixing. The same goes for wide receiver. With Amon-Ra St. Brown leading the charge, and young players like Jameson Williams and Khalif Raymond contributing, there's no room or reason to chase names like DJ Chark or Odell Beckham Jr. In fact, fans are already wondering why we don't see more snaps from guys like Antoine Tesla, and they're right to ask that. So, if those positions are fine, where should Detroit's attention be? The secondary. That's where things get interesting. The biggest name floating around right now is Asante Samuel Jr. The former Chargers corner has officially been cleared from his medical issues and, at 26 years old, brings the kind of energy and upside that every contender would love. Standing 5 feet 10 inches, 180 pounds, Samuel's game is built on quickness, awareness, and ball skills. When healthy, he's a difference maker, no question. But the health factor is what keeps teams cautious. Before his injury last season, he posted 11 solo tackles and 2 pass breakups in limited action, showing flashes of the same player who once looked like a rising star. Now, imagine pairing him with DJ Reed and Ifeatu Melifonwu in Detroit's secondary. That's the kind of move that could make an already strong defense downright dangerous. But here's the issue, everyone wants him. The Panthers, Packers, Vikings, 49ers, Bears, and Steelers have all reportedly reached out or shown interest. That kind of attention drives the price up, and for a team that's already cap-conscious and preparing for future extensions, it might not make financial sense. Still, it's fun to think about. A healthy Asante Samuel Jr. locking down one side of the field in Honolulu blue, Ford Field would erupt. If the Lions can't land Samuel, there are veteran options worth exploring, guys like Stephon Gilmore. Yes, he's older, and yes, his best days might be behind him, but that experience is valuable. If the Lions suffer injuries in the secondary, adding a player like Gilmore for depth could make sense. He's been there before, played under pressure, and understands what it takes to win. The same logic applies to Kendall Fuller, who briefly spent time on the Lions practice squad earlier this season. He knows the system, he's familiar with the environment, and if Detroit faces multiple injuries, bringing him back could be a smart, low-risk move. Realistically, none of these signings would happen unless something goes wrong. But fans have seen this movie before. Injuries hit, players rotate in and out, and suddenly that veteran corner you signed for depth becomes a starter in December. That's the nature of the NFL. The secondary isn't the only area being monitored. Safety depth could also become an issue. Kirby Joseph's knee hasn't been healing as quickly as the team hoped, and while Brian Branch continues to be a reliable presence, the Lions can't afford another setback at that position. That's where Justin Simmons comes into play. The longtime Bronco remains one of the more reliable veteran safeties on the market, and his leadership and ball skills would fit perfectly into Aaron Glenn's defense. Simmons is the type of player who could come in and stabilize things instantly if needed. There are other defensive names worth watching: James Bradbury, Cam Smith, Cam Sutton, Emmanuel Mosley, Marcus May, and Eddie Jackson, all of whom bring something different to the table. The question isn't whether Detroit can find a player, it's whether they need one badly enough to pull the trigger. On the front seven, the conversation shifts to players like Eric Kendricks and Shaq Barrett. Kendricks, despite being undersized, remains a productive linebacker who can rush the passer and cover space, a perfect insurance policy if someone like Malcolm Rodriguez goes down again. Barrett, meanwhile, is an aging edge rusher who can still make a play or two when called upon. He's not a long-term answer, but for a playoff push, he's the type of guy who could come in, get a sack in a key moment, and walk away a hero. But let's talk trenches, because that's where Detroit has quietly been struggling the most. The offensive line, once one of the team's greatest strengths, has been hit with injuries and inconsistency. Graham Glasgow has had a tough stretch, and the Lions are evaluating whether a change might be necessary at center or guard. That's where a name like Brandon Scherff becomes appealing. The veteran lineman, 33 years old and 315 pounds, has the size, power, and experience to stabilize things immediately. He's a plug-and-play option who's seen every kind of defensive front in the league. And considering that the Lions face Washington next, Scherff's former team, the timing feels poetic. Depth at guard is thin, especially while players like Giovanni Mahogany recover from serious injuries. Scherff isn't a long-term solution, but he could be the veteran presence needed to help the team survive the grind of November football. Shaq Mason is another name in that mix, not as strong of an option, but if injuries stack up, beggars can't be choosers, as the saying goes. Between the practice squad pickups and returning players like Miles Frazier, the Lions are piecing things together, but it's clear that offensive line health will play a huge role in how this season unfolds. And that's really the story here. This isn't panic, it's preparation. Detroit has built a roster designed to compete deep into the playoffs, but to get there, they'll need bodies, depth, and reliable veterans who can step in when called upon. The Lions have seen this script before, and they know exactly what it takes to keep the engine running. If the Detroit Lions were to make a move, it wouldn't be out of desperation, it would be about making sure the foundation they've built doesn't crack under pressure. Depth has always been the difference between contenders and pretenders in the NFL, and Detroit's front office knows that better than anyone. They've spent years constructing this roster piece by piece, developing players, drafting wisely, and building a culture rooted in toughness and accountability. But when you're in November, chasing playoff positioning, injuries don't care about culture. They test it. That's why Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell can't take anything for granted. You look across the NFC, the 49ers, the Eagles, the Cowboys, every one of those teams has had to make mid-season adjustments. Detroit's no different. The Lions' ability to adapt could determine whether this team stays near the top or starts slipping when it matters most. Let's take another look at the trenches, because that's where Detroit's identity begins. Taylor Decker and Penei Sewell returning to play this week is massive, not just for protection, but for stability. When those two are healthy, Jared Goff has time, the run game opens up, and the offense becomes balanced. The Lions front office understands that protecting Goff isn't just a luxury, it's a necessity, and that's where someone like Brandon Scherff could make all the difference. Sure, he's 33, but his experience is gold. He's played through the grind, he's been to Pro Bowls, and he understands the mental and physical demands of the late-season push. If Graham Glasgow continues to struggle or if injuries hit again, Scherff is exactly the type of veteran who could walk in and stabilize the interior. Sometimes it's not about the splashy move, it's about the smart one. On defense, Justin Simmons continues to make the most sense among all the remaining free agents. The Lions secondary has shown flashes of brilliance this season, Brian Branch's instincts, Kirby Joseph's ball hawking, but consistency has been the challenge. Simmons brings leadership, communication, and versatility. He's the kind of player who can elevate the guys around him. If there's one signing that could quietly pay off in a big way, it's this one. And speaking of the secondary, the Lions are watching how the Asante Samuel Jr. situation unfolds. Every day that goes by without him signing elsewhere keeps that door slightly open. Sure, the competition is fierce. The Panthers, Packers, and 49ers have already shown interest, but never underestimate what a winning culture and clear opportunity can do for a player's decision. If Detroit could convince Samuel to take a short-term prove-it deal, it could be the kind of under-the-radar move that pays off come playoff time. Then there's the linebacker depth. Malcolm Rodriguez returning helps, but the Lions know they can't risk being thin there again. Eric Kendricks remains available, and while he's no longer the explosive player he was in Minnesota, his football IQ is still elite. For a defense that relies heavily on communication and discipline, Kendricks could be the steady veteran voice that keeps everyone aligned. And yet, for all the discussion around names and possibilities, one thing remains clear: the Lions have options. They're not a team grasping for answers. They're a team refining their plan. This is what good organizations do. They prepare for every possible scenario. Let's not forget the importance of chemistry either. This locker room is one of the most unified in football. Any addition Holmes makes will need to fit that culture. Detroit doesn't bring in just anyone. They want players who buy into the message, who play for the guy next to them, who understand that this isn't the same old Lions team. The foundation of everything they've built, from Campbell's fiery speeches to Goff's leadership, revolves around that unity. And the truth is, the Lions don't need a star to finish this season strong. They just need health, cohesion, and smart depth. It's about adding the right piece, not the biggest one. Sometimes the best moves are the quiet ones that no one talks about in November but everyone remembers in January. Detroit has fought too hard to let this moment slip. The city has waited too long for a team like this, one that believes, one that fights, one that wins. Every roster move, every signing, every lineup decision carries the weight of that expectation. This is more than football now. It's about finishing what they started. So as fans, we can debate all day. Do you go for the young upside of Asante Samuel Jr., the veteran stability of Justin Simmons or Brandon Scherf? Or do you trust the guys already in the building and let the depth prove itself once again? Because at the end of the day, that's the real question, isn't it? Should Brad Holmes make another move to fortify this roster, or is this team already strong enough to finish the fight as it is? Let me know what you think, Lions fans. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Who would you sign, and why? And if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stay tuned. More Detroit Lions coverage is coming your way, with new videos every week right here.